Hello, viewers and listeners. So today what I wanted to talk about is the preconditions of society. Because one thing that I I see this happen a lot, and I just want to kind of make sure it's out there. There is a misunderstanding about what is required for society to function. So most people have this false assumption that our industrialized, commercialized society is normal, that it's normal to be able to go out to the store and buy eggs, that it's normal that whatever I need is going to be available at the store. It's normal that I can go to the gas station and put gas in my car, that it's normal that I can get chemicals for my pool, that all these things that we kind of take for granted are actually normal. But in fact, they're not. They're actually very special things. They're very unique things. Um, and the reason why there's a reason why they're available at this time and age, and it's not just. I think what some people think is they just think, oh well, it's just this time in history. It's like no, that's not it at all. It isn't the time in history. It's not that. It's not a chronological bias. It's actually a um, it's actually a moral, ethical, structural issue, and there are preconditions that are associated with having these things. So there's a reason why in the winter, you know, our pipes don't freeze and we're able to have heating and we're able to stay warm and we don't have to literally make a fire in our house to keep things warm. And that's because we have this whole societal structure. And the problem is that modern politics just assumes this whole structure as an assumed starting point, that it's easy, that pretty much any option will lead to this, and that we don't have to worry about it. And on top of that, we've also, because we've actually made it a fairly robust system, we have a lot of saved up, we have a lot of, there's a lot of things that we've been doing right so that we have an abundance. And everybody, we have all these people who've planned for abundance and to make sure that it keeps on going. But we forget that all of these things are conditional. That there are things that have to be in place for them to move forward. And so, um, a lot of what we've done with the pandemic, with the way we've handled our economy, we've kind of just taken that assumption and just kind of held it as an assumption and forget how the structure of our society is required to work in order for all these other things to work. Now, the interesting thing is, you know, it is true that a lot of the doomsaying of a lot of people like Peter Schiff and other people like that has never really come to pass. And I think the reason for that is because our economy, our society is actually pretty resilient. And so it can handle a lot of stress without completely breaking down. But the problem is that there's actually a limit to the amount of stress. So while Peter Schiff may have been wrong in whether or not the economic system in the US could handle the hits that it's taken, I don't think he was wrong that they were in fact hits. They were problems. They were issues. Um, and so and so what the inference that the a lot of people have made is that, well, since the doomsayers were wrong and that we didn't have doom, therefore that the people who said it's no problem at all must have been right. And I find that very questionable logic. It's like if you say, well, since I had this big purchase and I didn't go broke, well, that means I can do big purchases anytime I want and I won't go broke. It's true that if I really pinch every penny and I mortgage all the things, and if I sell all my extra stuff, I might have some money left over. I might have enough money to afford a purchase I didn't think I could make, but I can't do that every time. And eventually you run out of things that you can mortgage, uh, things that are extra, and eventually you start hitting the necessities. And so we've seen that recently. So, for example, one of the things is this whole alternative energy thing, which is just ridiculous. I don't know why more people, especially in the energy business, don't say this is ridiculous. Wind does not, you can't use wind to power everything. If you wanted an alternative energy source, it would have to be nuclear. But the people who are asking for alternative energy sources refuse to go nuclear. So it's unclear it seems that what people really want is a violation of the rules of math. And I'm sorry that math is math. Um, and I almost wonder if some of the more recent attacks on logic and math are actually kind of veiled attempts to shut people up who are using logic and math to point out the problems that the environmentalists are trying to foist upon us. And so, we've had natural gas. The cost of that has gone way up. Um, and then we've just had all sorts of energy prices that are going crazy. A lot of it's just because we didn't build the pipeline. There was the Keystone pipeline. I think it was just called the Keystone. Whatever the pipeline was, it was going from Canada, um, and they stopped production of it. They kept on stopping these things, and eventually you will run out of energy if you stop pumping it. Likewise with the economy, if you pay people not to work, eventually that catches up with you, and you start having problems like we do now. Um, you start having problems where uh, you can't the stuff you want can't get produced. The you don't have people who are able to staff companies, and you just wind up with a huge problem when you don't have enough workers to do the things you want to do. And so, anyway, it's just there's a basic common sense that has been lost because we all assume that the difference between you know everybody working uh, everybody working and people staying home and collecting checks is just where the money comes from. But no, there's a whole production end of the economy that has to be taken into account. If you don't take into account the production, then you don't have things which can be purchased in the economy. And I think this is really where a lot of economists and a lot of especially politicians and the public at large have gone wrong is they've just forgotten that all these things don't come from nowhere. The fact that they came from a store doesn't mean it came from nowhere. Somebody produced that, somebody shipped that, somebody inventoried that, somebody advertised it, somebody sold it, and if these people don't show up for work, we don't have things on the shelves. Um, someone had to plan it. Someone had to plan the logistics. And if these people are not if they're not employed, um, this is why the lockdown was just so ridiculous because um, you know the biggest problem, which would be bigger than the worst fears of the pandemic, would be if we had a total global economic shutdown. Um, thankfully, there are still a lot of people who believe enough in the country that they kept on producing. Um, but the problem is and thankfully we had enough kind of on the backlog that we could keep on delivering. But there's a limit to all that, and so we forget that there's limits to what we can do. Um, and we actually have the ability to have a very robust economy as long as we remember that there's prerequisites for having it. But this isn't just economics. This is also goodness. We forget that goodness in a society also has prerequisites. Social upbringing has prerequisites. This is one of the things that I think people miss, for example, on the gay marriage debate. Um, the problem that I see with gay marriage is not, so someone says, well, these two people getting married doesn't affect your marriage, and that's true enough. Um, but the thing is it does affect the way that my kids uh, see uh, normalized relationships, both with opposite sex and also with the same sex. So basically what it does is it means that uh, it basically means that close male friendships are actually very difficult because you now have to navigate that if you're too close in a male friendship, it could be interpreted as sexual, and it basically means that every relationship you have has the potential of developing into a sexual one. So while as previously you could separate out fairly easily the ones that you have to be careful that they don't develop that way and the ones that you don't, now all of your relationships fall into that. And so we don't see the impact of normalization of gay marriage and the way that it um, impacts this. So I'm just recognizing I forgot to set the title of this before it occurred. So I don't know if the title is actually the previous episode. We'll see if editing this title um, um, will actually fix it. Uh, Calling it the prerequisites of success. All right. So and it should in fact be in my Mindcast playlist. I don't see that option now. Oh well, there it is. Yeah. So anyway, things have prerequisites. A lot of things have morality as prerequisites. Um, a lot of things have, if we get rid of our moral systems, what does that do to and it's not, the other thing is that we forget that causation is not instant in society. Societal causation usually happens over multiple generations. So what happened is, like with gay marriage, like, see, we instituted gay marriage and the next day the world didn't fall apart. Well, that's ridiculous. Societal causation takes generations. And so the question is, in 3 generations, what will people's view of marriage be? And how, and just interpersonal relationships, how will gay marriage affect interpersonal relationships in three generations? And I just gave my opinion on that, and this is something that nobody wants to talk about. um, there's a whole, how does teaching math is a prerequisite for a lot of societal thinking that we assume that other people should be doing. But if you remove some of the rigor of the math curriculum, then you'll remove the rigor of the thinking of the general public, and then the public's ability to make the decisions they need to make will go away. And we forget how many things rely on the population being able to make general discernments and judgments. And a lot of people think that, well, since there's 2 sides to every issue, well, it doesn't seem to matter. Well, the thing is that what counts as a side worthy of being considered depends on who the population is. There are things that you can't get away with. There's always multiple sides of an issue because there's actually an infinite number of sides to an issue. But the society basically generally coalesces around a few things that make sense to the public. And so it's not that if we educate people that they'll all choose the right thing. It's that the set of things which people are willing to consider gets reduced to only those that make some kind of sense. And so anyway, but if you remove the logic, then the logical basis of both sides kind of goes away, and you wind up having nonsense ideas. So anyway, I just I'll stop blathering on now, but I just wanted to kind of put that idea there that there's a lot of things that have prerequisites that we don't think about it, and we need to start thinking about what are the prerequisites of our society. Because if we don't think about that, we'll accidentally might get rid of one that we don't even realize that's there. So this needs to be on the front of our mind, not the back of our mind, and we need to start incorporating this into our everyday thinking. So this is Jonathan Bartlett with BP Mindcast.